Good morning or good afternoon to all of you. On behalf of the ASEM Education Secretariat Belgium, I'd like to welcome you all in our fourth and last workshop in our series of the Action Plan 2030 workshops. My name is Nadia Reinders, and together with my colleague Emily de Geldere, I coordinate the ASEM Education Secretariat, which is currently hosted by the Flemish community at the French-speaking community of Belgium. During this last workshop, we will focus on the fourth strategic objective as formulated in the draft strategy 2030. If you have missed the previous three workshops, which were also dedicated to one of these strategic objectives, please visit our website where you can find the recordings as well as the presentations of the other workshops. We will put also the link to this page directly in the chat box. The objective of today's workshop is twofold. At first, we would like to provide some inspiration and insights in the current and in the future developments regarding lifelong learning in general, but also in TVET in particular. Therefore, we have invited 6 experts in the field who will give their view on how the ASEM education process can contribute to promote lifelong learning. Secondly, this workshop will also provide you the opportunity to brainstorm on how the ASEM education process can contribute to promote lifelong learning even more in the future. Let's start with our first objective by inspiring you with a keynote presentation. For the workshop of today, we have invited for you Mrs. Renée Tan. Mrs. Tan is Director of Research in the Institute of Adult Learning in Singapore, or short IAL, where she leads the IAL's research activities to inform policy and practice in the sector of continuing education and training. Mrs. Tan will give us better insights into how to promote and catalyze enterprise innovation for lifelong learning, and she will also reflect upon how the ASEM education process could further promote and support lifelong learning. Mrs. Tan, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nadia. A very warm good morning or good afternoon to all of you. I'm very pleased and honored to be here. And just allow me a second while I share my screen. Yes. Okay. All right, so the topic I'm going to be speaking on today is promoting and catalyzing enterprise innovation in lifelong learning. This is something we do over here at the Institute for Adult Learning, and so I'm here to share my experience. I'm going to fairly quickly cover 4 main parts in this presentation. Firstly, some national moves for enterprise innovation, which will set the context of what we do here in Singapore. Then we'll move to enterprise innovation in lifelong learning, which is the key thrust of today's presentation. The ASEM education process and enterprise innovation, how it could lead to more collaborations in this area, and Asia-Europe synergies in enterprise innovation. Okay, let's start with some national moves for enterprise innovation. So here in Singapore, education is and lifelong learning, innovation, education are all very big discourse areas currently. Okay, and on the left side of my slide, you see our Deputy Prime Minister, Heng Swee Keat, who recently unveiled the second box here, the Research, Innovation and Enterprise 2025 plan, where we are committed to spending 25 billion on research and innovation over the next 5 years within Singapore. And he has noted that COVID-19 has accelerated innovation and put a premium on resilience and greater priority on sustainability. So this is the call that goes out to all of us to get enterprises and individuals in line with how innovation is going to have larger impact on our lives. Okay. On the right-hand side, you see our Senior Minister, Tharman Shanmugaratnam, who is dedicated to lifelong learning. And it comes together, and he says there must be investments in lifelong learning and education, which create a positive and self-reinforcing spiral of learning, skills accumulation, and job progression. So what we're saying is that the national call for innovation and lifelong learning is great, and people are starting to anyway heed the call, okay, amidst the many support plans that are going on in Singapore. In a recent, just last week, education forum, our Minister for Education, Lawrence Wong, spoke about how universities have to fall in line with the call for innovation and lifelong learning. And he threw out 3 challenges to the universities. Firstly, about doing better in terms of teaching and learning outcomes for all university students. And for this, I think he was referring to learning experiences and the relevance, making sure that all courses are as relevant as possible in this very rapidly changing world. Next, that universities need to embrace lifelong learning. And I think for this, he was making the point that universities in Singapore anyway, who have traditionally been very used to accepting undergraduates at a certain point and then postgraduates at a certain point, now need to embrace a wider range of entry points to those seeking to come to universities to take up courses of different sorts, not just degrees, but shorter courses as well. Okay, and finally, universities need much closer collaboration with industry. So here, I think he is bringing together enterprises, innovation, and lifelong learning, because the 3 have to move along together in order for the entire workforce to benefit from this move. So that was to sort of set the context that in Singapore, this is currently what is happening and how we are looking at enterprise innovation and lifelong learning. Okay, so I now move to giving a sort of a short case study of what we do here at IAL that demonstrates how we are making moves to take on innovation in lifelong learning as well. So enterprises, when they speak of innovation, tend to speak about it in 2 ways. Okay, so they see innovation through their main businesses. So these are vertical strands of innovation where they innovate the way they do business, the way that their business, presents itself to the rest of the world. They look at new products, new services, etc. So when asked, this is a study that we conducted, a small study we conducted, and when asked, what is your innovation? What is your company's innovation appetite? Business owners, we surveyed the business owners, they rated innovation as being very open. They said they were open and enthusiastic. And so they said that they had the appetite to take on innovation, okay? But they were aware that innovation meant, much cost and quite a great deal of disruption as well. Okay, interestingly, okay, whilst they were very enthusiastic about innovation at large, if you look at this bar on the right-hand side, that is learning innovation appetite. So if enterprises were to take on learning innovation, they're not so convinced, or at least they think that it is more difficult. Okay, primarily because enterprises see learning as a by the way, okay, and not the main thrust of their businesses. Okay, if we then ask them about, readiness. Okay, so you may be very enthusiastic about innovation, but what is your state of readiness in the company? Again, they came and they said that, as the business owner, I am of course, set to put my enterprise and my whole business through what it takes to innovate, okay, and to come across and to emerge from it stronger. So people and culture came out as the strongest pillar. But again, if you look at this second pillar from the left, that's organization and collaboration, then they're not so convinced. So innovation is very hard to undertake when you're just a single enterprise. But when there is collaboration, especially across sectors, it gets much easier and much better. Okay, so these were what we learned from this study and many other studies that a few other studies that we've conducted, as well as ground sensing. Okay, so over here at the Institute for Adult Learning, we have a facility called InLab, all right, short for Innovation Lab. This is a little snapshot of what a facility looks like. Empty now because of COVID-19. Okay, so but we are recognized as the lead facility for the continuing education and training community to come together to explore, collaborate, work on, contribute to learning innovation. And this is recognized within the industry digital plan, okay, which is a national level digital plan for getting the sector onto a good start where digitalization is concerned. Okay, and of course, InLab has a few platforms to make this happen. All right, so there are knowledge awareness platforms, there are capability building platforms. So Byte and Log are two of our knowledge awareness platforms where we engage, experts, and we engage various people in the community to speak and familiarize the community, the rest of the community, with innovative trends and insights that are happening right now. Okay, but the one that I want to really focus on is InnovPlus on this right-hand side here. Okay, the lower right-hand bottom. InnovDev is actually a support initiative for digitalization of course material. GEM is an ideation platform, but Plus is the one that really helps in enterprises to totally get engaged with learning innovation. Okay, so how does it work? We put out a call for learning challenges that in organizations or enterprises may be facing. Okay, and then with that learning challenge, again, it's thrown out to the public, and we then call for possible ideas, solutions. Okay, and in Singapore's case, we do privilege digital means and technology to solve these challenges. So learning solutionists, solution providers of different sorts, they would step forward and they would then pitch their ideas to these enterprises who had put up the learning challenges in the first place. Okay, they select a partner, one of these learning solutionists, and together the team goes into a competitive bid where they pitch for a prize. And the prize is a very tempting grant from the government. It's 200,000 Singapore dollars to build the prototype, if there is one, because this is very technology enabled, right? To build a prototype and to get things moving, okay, on how this changes the experience of learning in enterprises. So I'd like to focus, these are some of our prototypes. Excuse me. These are some of our prototypes, and they range from mobile to those requiring artificial intelligence, to those with virtual reality, augmented reality, etc. But I'd like to focus on this little one through Changi General Hospital and tell you a story about them. Okay, so Changi General Hospital is like a mainstream hospital, right? It has it's part of a larger group, but it has an accident and emergency department, as well as related clinics and offers full hospital facilities. So Changi General Hospital, the accident and emergency, the head of accident and emergency realized that her triage nurses, okay, so those that meet you first when you come in to A&E. Of course, obviously, not an accident case, not a heart attack case, but you come in, in some distress. The triage nurse sees to you. So she realized that she had a challenge because her triage nurses were risk averse. So they were assessing these patients, all of them at level 1, which meant they had to be seen to immediately. Okay, so of course this puts a large strain on the hospital's resources and denies those who are truly in a health emergency condition from being first in queue to seek medical attention. So she wanted to kind of coach the nurses and have the nurses practice how they could assess such cases more accurately. All right, so they threw out the learning challenge. This is a doctor, mind you, okay, a head of accident and emergency, nothing to do with learning, with nothing to do with learning professionals. She just had the desire to see her nurses, make it. So she put out the challenge, and this company who's been dabbling in solutions with artificial intelligence stepped forward. All right, visionary schoolmen, and they proposed a little mobile and online solution, which tapped on something very basic, just role play and videos. Okay, so they had the nurses and Changi General Hospital staff act out various scenarios that they see quite often. Patients presenting with kind of stomach issues, breathing difficulties, pain in various areas. And the nurses, in their learning, on their own time, would go through the little short video clips, and they would then assess the level of requirement for medical attention. Okay, so this is so what they're doing is they're mimicking the actual role, except that it's with a simulated video. Okay, so this the app, all right, the intervention, the solution is able to give the triage nurse answers. Okay, is able to give the triage nurse feedback, all right, on how they have assessed the patient and their questioning technique, especially, okay, to delve deeper into the patient's condition. So there we have one example of how we try to catalyze learning innovation through a series of activities, okay, in one initiative. All right, so what we've done then is to put together these 5 Ps. Okay, we provide a platform, we work on instituting a partnership between the two organizations, generally the organization with the challenge and a solution organization. We have them work together on that project. All right, we provide advice, research-backed advice on the best pedagogies that will be delivered via this initiative. And then when it's completed, we try to proliferate this. Okay, and this is in line with the Bloomberg Innovation Index that recently came out, where the Citigroup global chief economist Catherine Mann actually said that innovation brings about new products, new services, etc. But the important thing, the real metric for success, she says, is diffusion and adoption. All right, so the rest of the sector and other sectors could take on these learning solutions. So this then is how we try to promote that learning innovation helps workers do better, gives them, positive learning experiences so that they will be encouraged to further take on lifelong learning. And it gives the enterprises the conviction that learning innovation does help them to better their business, their enterprises, okay, and their businesses. Yes, and so with this, how does the ASEM how do I see the ASEM education process working in tandem with enterprise innovation? From the case study that I've brought up, I looked at the ASEM education process. This is a diagram that's on the ASEM education process, the website. And I think that there's just perfect fit here, right? At the stakeholder level, I'm aware that this is an informal platform and that there are various stakeholders. Stakeholders eventually become partners if we look at it. So on a global scale, because learning innovation is backed by research, is backed by participation of an entire ecosystem, all right, and through various projects of different sorts, for different needs, for different learning needs, and together it propels lifelong learning to quite a great extent. So I think that there is good fit within the ASEM education process already for taking on the promotion of enterprise innovation in lifelong learning. Okay, how then can we also leverage of Asia-Europe synergies in enterprise innovation? Okay, so for this, I think that both Asia and Europe, to quite a large extent, in Singapore and in many of the Asian countries, there is an openness to such collaboration, to such global partnership. So there are open markets and opportunities. And I think there are very many plentiful ready channels out there to leap off, so to speak. Okay, there is great scope for knowledge sharing. Okay, we can tap on ASEM's research networks to propel many of these knowledge sharing initiatives, and we can learn of best practices, mutual best practices amongst ourselves. There is room for deep collaboration in this area where we could signal intent and build active, in-depth partnership and participation. We could nurture these resulting ecosystems that come about. And importantly, I think there is also room for enhancing learning experiences because if learning experiences at work, at school, at work, tend to be positive ones, we are actually laying strong foundations for this whole notion of lifelong learning. And if we strengthen links between work, learning, and life, I think we would then have a lot more positive participation in lifelong learning opportunities globally. Okay, and I think with that, thank you. I'll be happy to take any questions, please.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Mrs. Tan, for your inspiring and insightful keynote presentation. I must say I'm very impressed on how you stimulate innovative learning solutions in Singapore. And I think most ASEM education countries were all looking for these kind of innovative solutions on how to bring adults back to learning and how to integrate learning as a natural thing inside the enterprises. So I think this presentation can be very inspiring to all of us. I'm having a look to the chat box meanwhile, because we have asked that you can put all your questions you have for Mrs. Tan in the chat box, or you can just raise your hand. That's also a possibility. I don't see any questions at the moment. So if there are no questions for Mrs. Tan, I would just like to end your presentation by thanking you for your insights and your interesting presentation. Then we can just move on to the next part of our workshop. I would like to hand over the virtual microphone now to our moderator of the panel session, Professor Azira Hashim. Mrs. Hashim is professor at the Faculty of Languages and Linguistics and the principal coordinator in the Asia-Europe Institute at the University of Malaya. And she's also leading the Jean Monnet Center of Excellence project on ASEAN and EU in dialogue. Please, Professor Azira, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nadia. I think we're starting the panel about 10 minutes early. Good morning, good afternoon.
That's okay. We have a lot of speakers today, so
yes. Okay.
Then there will be more time for discussion after the panel.
Okay, after an interesting talk by the keynote speaker, we now have a panel of five speakers from different entities in different parts of the world. There are 5 speakers, and we will allocate about 10 minutes per presentation. I invite all of you to put in your questions in the chat box, and we would prefer to have Q&A at the end of the 5 presentations, but if there are any burning questions, or if there are questions about clarification, you could ask these questions after the speaker presents. Yeah, so we've got 5 very interesting presentations with people from mixed background and mixed experiences. Our first speaker is Dr. Seamus Otuama from the ASEM Lifelong Learning Hub. He's the chair of the ASEM Lifelong Learning Hub and director of the Adult Continuing Education at University College Cork. Dr. Seamus Otuama is the director of the Adult Continuing Education at UCC Ireland, the oldest university center for the delivery of adult and continuing education. His current research is focused on applying theories of respect, recognition, dignity, and rights in the field of adult education. His other research interests include democracy in the social context of science and technology and the law. He is a professionally trained journalist and was formerly a professional youth and community worker. And he will be talking about ASEM Education Plan 2030, a framework for lifelong learning research in the ASEM region 2020 to 2025. The floor is yours, Dr. Otuama.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid my internet connection is not so good today for some reason, so if it breaks down from time to time, please accept my apologies. Thank you very much for that nice introduction, and thank you also to Dr. Tan for a very inspiring keynote, giving us a sense of the innovations that are happening in Singapore. The idea, I suppose, of the ASEM Lifelong Learning Hub is to support the entire project with specific emphasis on lifelong learning research, lifelong learning policy, and critically, I suppose, deepening partnership between the 2 regions and between the peoples of the 2 regions in lifelong learning. And of course, the ASEM project is critically important to all of us in relation to that. So just to give you a little background, the ASEM Lifelong Learning Hub was previously hosted by Denmark, supported by the Danish government for a number of years. And in the last year, this passed on to Ireland, where it's currently hosted by the Government of Ireland through the Department of Further and Higher Education and Innovation and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. And it's located in University College Cork, and I have the honour of being the chair for Ireland's hosting of the hub. Last October, we had a forum meeting of all the members of the research networks and a number of other stakeholders across Asia and Europe, contributing to an event over 3 days, which we examined the role of the ASEM Lifelong Learning Hub, where it was going, and tried to plot a future direction for it. This plan, I suppose, ironically, I was checking the pocket of my suit, which I haven't worn for some time. And the last, the thing in the inside pocket this morning was a boarding card for a flight on the 3rd of February 2020. And this was the last time that I used a flight, that I was anywhere outside of Ireland. So a lot of things have happened in the last year. So we originally had planned to have this forum in person in Ireland, but unfortunately that wasn't possible. So we had it online in October, and it worked very successfully. And we developed a vision, a framework for what we would do working in collaboration over the next 5 years. So on the next screen, Emily, we can just see the mission that was agreed at this meeting. And I think they fit with the overall ASEM project, and I suppose the aspirations of all of us who are interested in engaging internationally. So it says a lifelong learning research that addresses the complexities of contemporary society. And I think COVID has really brought home to us the level of that complexity, but we have a lot of other challenges in relation to climate change, for instance, the Sustainable Development Goals, migration, and of course also the challenges in terms of lifelong learning and the future directions of people's works and careers and so on. And I think this was one of the points I think that was very clear in the keynote, the level of complexity that exists in the world today, and it's very encouraging to see how Singapore is addressing that complexity. Again, we say how to live with each other in a changing world, and I think this has been a huge challenge for us. We've seen a lot of disruption and disharmony, and lifelong learning is critical in allowing people an opportunity to see a better way to live together, to understand each other better, and so on. And I think this is critically important. We see lifelong learning is not linear. It's divided into phases, having exit points and conclusions, but also re-entry points. So people come back to lifelong learning many times in their careers. And I think it's important, I suppose, to see that education, which is part of lifelong learning, is not something that starts in kindergarten and finishes when you graduate from university. It's no longer like that. It's much more complex. We want to address ordinary people and global challenges. So I think we're reflecting there on this idea of locality. So what we talk about, what we do, has to have impact for ordinary people in their everyday lives, but we also have to be very conscious that we live in a world of interdependencies, and we rely upon each other, and we need to save the planet as well. How to live our lives better. I think this is very important, and this is not a new concept or a new idea. It's been discussed, I suppose, since the beginning of humanity. But each person has a life, and we have to respect that person's need to live their life well, and we need to help people to live their lives better, regardless of where they are in their life cycle, or who they are, where they come from, what religion, what language, what color their skin is, what gender they are. These things are immaterial. Collaboration and partnership building is a key mission for us, and this comes from the fact, I suppose, that we're based in a small country, a small island. Actually, we're probably the most westerly point in the ASEM family, or pretty close to it. So it's important for us to reach out to everybody, and I think this has been part of the Irish government's approach as well, and in general, it's Ireland's role in the world. We see it as partnership building, collaboration, cooperation, understanding other people and working with them. So this is going to be very important for us. So we talk about lifelong learning, from basic education to advanced skills and knowledge. So it's the whole remit there. And of course, it doesn't matter who you are. I mean, you may have a PhD, but that doesn't mean that you don't need to continue to acquire basic skills. Of course you do. You know, so we need to be more holistic, I suppose, in terms of how we understand lifelong learning as well. We see lifelong learning as the essential paradigm in an unpredictable world in which, you know, there's huge technological challenges, technological innovations, climate, migration, security, and global health. These are all among the kinds of things we're talking about, but of course there are many more that can go into that little box. We need to generate evidence to understand current trends and influence future directions. So this is an important aspect of the Lifelong Learning Hub, is to generate the evidence to create better futures and a better current time for all of us as well. So we move on to the next slide now. And this was a statement of intent, which was adopted at that meeting in relation to what is the intent of the ASEM Lifelong Learning Hub over the next period. So number one, which is interesting, is what we are doing this morning, contributing to the ASEM education process, because lifelong learning is one of the 4 strategic objectives of the ASEM education strategy for 2030. And that's critically important that it is, and it's critically important that we contribute to that agenda as strongly and as well considered as possible. We're going to be oriented towards an approach towards collaboration, and I want to speak to all of you again this morning about that, because we're very keen to spread the network to include as many different actors from the ASEM community as possible. We are cognizant of the Sustainable Development Goals, the global and other global challenges, and also on existing policies and international commitments. So rather than us operating in a vacuum, we need to be cognizant of many important policies and instruments that have been developed in the international community, you know, under United Nations and its various bodies, etc., and other fora. To thrive in a carbon neutral digital age, we want to widen people's opportunities and improve their well-being. And this is a huge challenge. This is a huge challenge for all of us. You know, this is critically important, and we want to be part of that reshaping of the world in this context. Prepare people to deal with increasing complexity and unpredictability. And again, I suppose the year that has just passed has just shown us the levels of complexity and unpredictability that may come our way from time to time. But this is an ongoing process. Before COVID, this was already an agenda. We talk about a revision of the Delors 4 ideas. So I suppose putting onto this the key idea of learning to live with others, because this is a big, big challenge for us in the 21st century. We want to seek strategic partnerships to disseminate our results, our reports and other outcomes as widely as possible. So we don't want to be working in a vacuum. We want to have an impact in the world. We want people to know what we're doing, and we want what we do to be useful to people. We want to create strategic alliance with ASEF, the Asia-Europe Foundation, and many of our colleagues from ASEF are here this morning as well. And we are, I think, building and cementing those relationships as well. And we also want to be a resource for governments, you know, so that governments can see that we are a source that they can call on in terms of developing their agendas around lifelong learning or specific aspects of lifelong learning. So just move on maybe to the next slide now. So this is a common research agenda where we said equity and inclusion were critically important for us. And we want to re-emphasize that point. Identity, respect and dignity, these are important. We recognize all of these. Digital education and ICT are critically important. As we see, they are having a greater role in the world. And I suppose, again, in the past year, we have seen a massive acceleration of that whole process. Recognizing demographic trends, such as aging and migration, and these are critically important. development of knowledge, policy and capacity building. And there's a lot of challenges in a lot of different directions in relation to this, and engagement with civil society and community-based lifelong learning. And sometimes this is forgotten, and this is a critically and huge aspect of lifelong learning. We often forget that the vast majority of our learning is done in an informal and non-formal context, and that applies to everybody, no matter what their education level is. And we just need to be cognizant of that, recognize the importance of that in our agenda. So we'll just move on to the next slide. And this was our research networks. So we have established a Council of Research Network Coordinators, which met a few weeks ago. Includes the terms of reference in terms of how we operate. And we've asking each research network to develop an operational plan. We hope that they will do this on an annual basis and have a longer term trajectory. And we want these operational plans to be shared across the research network so everybody knows what everybody else is doing, and we want the research networks to collaborate with each other as well. Each research network is now set up that there's an overall coordinator, but there's a joint coordinator Asia and a joint coordinator Europe. And the reason for this is we want, I suppose, a more coherent governance structure within the research networks, but we want to ensure that the voices of both regions are equally heard. We are exhorting the research networks to have equitable gender and geographical spread in their membership. And this is a huge challenge. And again, this morning, I would say or this afternoon, depending on where you are, we would ask people to think about this in terms of adding to that network and bringing new people on board. So we expect each research network to have their own agenda, but also to build synergies with the other research networks. And I think we're seeing some of this already. We want the research networks to engage with the wider research communities and stakeholders. So we don't want to be duplicating what other people are doing, but we want to work with them and to build mutually beneficial relationships. And we want all our outputs to be open source. Okay, so we just move on again to give you just a very quick view of which are the research networks, and this might give you an idea of the ones you want to join or contribute to, or you may have identified people who would like to contribute to these. So Research Network 1 we call ASEM, is do digital learning management systems, techno-pedagogical skills and knowledge network communities in lifelong learning. Research Network 2 is workplace learning. Number 3 is professionalization of adult teachers and educators in the ASEM countries. Research Network 4 is national strategies for lifelong learning. And all these 4 existed in the previous iteration of the ASEM Lifelong Learning Hub, and all are active. But we are now adding 2 new networks. Research Network 5, Lifelong Learning Transitions. And this is about all the complexities and challenges in relation to lifelong learning in terms of things like micro-credentials, things like recognition of prior learning, validation of non-formal and informal learning, dealing with entry and exit points, access routes, and all of these things. Because it is a very, very, very complex landscape now, and it's difficult, I suppose, and challenging for us to design it in a way that's useful to all learners, and for all learners to be able to navigate their way through all of these, and also to develop new tools and new ways in which we can assist people to respond to their learning needs in their context. And the 6th one is learning cities and learning regions. And again, learning cities have become an extremely important part of the world, and I'm deeply involved in learning cities myself. Cork City, which is my home city, is a UNESCO learning city, and we're very much engaged in the UNESCO Learning City Network. And this network will be working in tandem with UNESCO. UIL, UNESCO Institute of Lifelong Learning in Hamburg, is a strategic partner with us in this network. Okay, so we just move along again. So this is basically a question for you. How can you be involved, or how can you encourage others to be involved? We want to renew all the research networks. So even the 4 that are already in existence, there is an open call from them for new members, new collaborations, and new projects, new ideas. We don't want anybody to feel that everything is settled and fixed and that they're working in closed networks. These are all open networks, and we want them to remain open, and we want to encourage more and new people to get involved. So we want new researchers, and they may be university based, but they may be working with industry, they may be working with NGOs, they may be working with civil society organizations, and so on and so forth. We are open to suggestions and invitations to everybody. We invite policymakers and policy shapers, those people who make policy and who shape policy. We would like their voices, and it's important that their voices are around the table to keep the project grounded on what the essentials are. We want to ensure equitable gender and geographical spread, so that's really important for us. We want to ensure that all of the ASEM countries are well represented in the ASEM Lifelong Learning Hub research networks. So we really made that call to people again this morning in terms of your own countries, your own regions, to see who could be involved. We welcome new partnerships and cooperation. So we want to work with others. We don't want to duplicate what anybody is doing, but we feel that there are great opportunities in collaboration and partnership building, and we really want to push that agenda as much as we can. So we're inviting you to email us, and we have 2 email addresses there that you can email us. So my colleague Joni is also on somewhere there this morning. So please email us. We will chat to you and consider more and new ways we can develop partnership. So that's a very quick overview of the ASEM Lifelong Learning Hub. I hope I stayed within the time frame. And
thank you. Yes. Thank you, Seamus, for this very interesting talk. I'm sure the audience was very interested in the future directions of the Lifelong Learning Hub and the plans to further collaboration amongst different stakeholders. It's also very interesting to see that you have actually aligned what you're doing with the international policies. And please take note, everyone, that there's a call for collaboration. So anyone interested in working together with Seamus, please contact him at the email given. Thank you very much. Yeah. So we move on to the next speaker. The second speaker is Ms. Nur Sahara Sadiq. Nur Sahara is the Assistant Director of the Institute for Adult Learning Singapore. She is a member of the IAL Center for Research in Work and Learning. Her research interests pertain to the employability of workers amidst the changing nature of work, and she has worked on a comprehensive study of the learning and development of non-permanent workers in Singapore, and currently working on a comparative research study on the understanding of talent in rising Asia. So Dr. Sahara will be talking about the work that she's been doing over the last few years. Please welcome Sahara.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me on this session. First, Nadia, thank you so much for controlling the slides from your end. So everyone, just to share with you, I ran into technological difficulties as well, and I can't control the slides from my end. So Nadia will help me to control it from her end. So please apologize if there's disruptions to how this the flow of this presentation. Very pleased to share with you, following up on Sherma's presentation, the work of Research Network 2. Research Network 2 on Workplace Learning is led by Professor Karen Evans from Institute of Education UK. We have 2 coordinators, an Asian coordinator, Ruhizan Yassin from Malaysia, and the Europe coordinator, Aneta Estonda from Germany/Australia. You'll see here on the screen our last face-to-face meeting at Innsbruck beautiful country in Austria in November 2019, just a few months before the pandemic really struck. And at this session, I remember we were really looking forward to meeting actually, and we were discussing other platforms that we could actually set up meetings for, including in Singapore, including in UK, etc. And there were so many discussions. Well, you know, things have turned a different way, but we continue to keep in touch. The work continues. We have meetings online, and that has been really, really useful. You would actually see that this is a very, very warm, collegial group. We've been together for so long. This is the 16th year that the Research Network 2 has been formed. A very long process of building trust, building relations, and exchanging knowledge. And I would like to also highlight that there are more than 15 active members in this network. We welcome new participants to it, but I thought today I could share with you a flavor of what we do here at the Research Network 2. I've been a member for just 4 years. But you know, I feel that I've been welcomed into this what we call a family, really. Nadia, next.
Do you still see it? I think
Yeah.
no, 1 minute. It was there, not anymore. Yeah, should be back now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Some projects that we have done, recent progress. Our book that we actually did a project on, and we wrote a collection of articles on workplaces as learning spaces, that has received the Bernard Roth Award for Project Excellence in 2019. We have moved on to basically work on 3 other projects between 2017 to 2020. You will see it there. This is basically a call for proposals that was put up. People decided, put up what they wanted to do, and the members actually select which are the ones that they wanted to pursue over the 3 years, from 2017 to 2020. And these projects were selected, and people select which project they want to be part of. And obviously, this is not easy because, you know, you actually need to cater for different professional interests, different project priorities, etc. But I think there's a lot of appreciation of one another's expertise and the comparative aspects of the research that keeps us going. So you could actually see every project actually has multiple countries in it, and this is very, very deeply appreciated by the members of the Research Network too. Nadia, next. Nadia.
Seems to be a problem with going to the next slide. I'm sorry for that. Yes.
I'll just give you an example of this project that it's basically put together by a few of us from Singapore, from Finland, from Austria, and from France. We were basically looking at how to expand the concepts of workplace learning in the context of what we recognize, you know, as researchers, the changing nature of work. And we basically focus on a particular group, the of those impacted by the changing nature of work, the global workers. And we agreed as a team, you know, that this was really an important area. We designed a project that actually met the research interests of the different members on it, and what was realistic, and yet at the same time pushing the conceptual understanding and also the leveraging on different traditions. Our paper is currently being put up for publication, and we've already been knowledge to actually be original in his conceptual contribution. If I could share with you what the members in this team has feel about this project, I think that would make it more you'll be able to connect better with it. Nadia, the next slide, please. Yeah, and essentially you actually see here that there's actually a really very good collaboration. This was very important because each of us came from different disciplines and we brought different things to the table. It was different cultural ways of thinking as well. The richness came out really in our own experience, in our own reflection. We really felt that it was really a good exchange. We built on what the network already was doing, which is basically learning spaces, the book I shared earlier, and we take it forward into what global work and learning spaces might look like. We basically know each other, so this was not like come together and work on a project independent of knowing one another. When we actually meet at any network conferences, that was a time for us to basically learn more about one another personally, kind of bond and enjoy ourselves, and that's really important, right? Only when we actually develop a good camaraderie, that's when the trust is there and the exchange, the respect is very clear. This was basically, if you are a member of our network, you would actually see how this camaraderie is really very important and underpins a lot of the ideas that then pop and get supported by different members. Nadia, next one. Yeah, and this is a new project that we launched, and I actually would like to invite participation on resilience on skills ecosystem in Asian and European countries in pandemic times. This is basically taking the issue around pandemic and see what is the impact this will have on the skills ecosystems in both Asian and European contexts. It would be a broad sequential surveys of pandemic responses using researchers as key informants. We use an online survey tool, but the data that's going to be collected is going to be jointly analyzed by different members of the team. We will look at it from the strategies as well, the effects that we identified, and a range of issues that are actually built into how we study this. I actually am very pleased to share with you the design of this project and invite participation. Nadia, next. So this is the design of the project. The participants to date, we have Germany, Austria, France, Japan, Latvia, Lithuania, Singapore, Thailand, and UK. And we are very happy to have more members come in to participate in this project. It's fine. We've completed round 1, the data collection in October 2020. We still think it's time. It's okay for members to come in, new members to come in from round 2 onwards, because there is a way for us to include new members into this research. We will be looking at how we can do the analysis in an interactive manner, how some possible outputs that we've already thought about in terms of dense descriptions at country level, comparative analysis, bilateral comparisons. We are obviously looking at joint publications, Congress contributions, and references for future research agendas. Finally, I would like to share, Nadia, next one. A reflection here from an article written by Dang, where one member, Prof. Kulsum, reflected on the cross-cultural exchanges that occur as part of that interaction between different members in the project that she led, an ASEM RN Research Network 2 project that she led. Here, she basically reflected on how it actually helped to basically push a different set of understanding. And I would actually like to share my own reflection in addition to what Prof. Kulsum has mentioned. I actually find that when I was part of the projects, I understand that the heterogeneity of Europe. I actually have members from France reflecting on how it's very hard to basically publish in an Anglo-Saxon publication, different traditions, etc. And me from Asia, when we are discussing with members from India, etc., we also understand the differences. So Asia and Europe is a lot more heterogeneous, and that makes this participation in these networks very, very meaningful. And the only way to, in our mind, to basically facilitate that knowledge exchange and that knowledge building is really when we come together to do the research together. And that's really what our focus has been in Research Network 2. We actively look for those opportunities, and we invite members who share the same interests and the same passion to join us. So thank you very much. I hope that gives you a good overview, and more than happy to take any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Sahara. I think it's very inspiring to see the 3 projects that you've carried out, and also the new one that you'll be undertaking with an international team. It's really good to see that you've worked with a good mix of people from 2 regions. And I think the projects, there'll be questions about the projects, the one that you talked about learning in the global world, and also the new project on resilience in skill ecosystems. And please take note that Sahara is looking for collaborators in this particular project as well. We'll leave the questions to the end, and we'll move to the 3rd speaker. Yeah, the 3rd speaker is Mr. Georgios Zisimos, who since March 2014 has been at the European Training Foundation in Turin, and he holds a senior officer position on EU education and training policies. In the ETF, he focuses on the role of the EU policies in education and training to partner countries, and he's currently in charge of the team on Centers of Vocational Excellence. He will be talking to us on the ETF Network for Excellence. Please welcome Mr. Zisimos.
Thank you, Azira. Good morning to all participants. Let me share my screen for my presentation. Does it work? No.
Not yet, no.
No, that's not the correct one. Can you see it now?
Not yet, no.
No. Okay, let me try again to share my screen. No. Okay. Could you share it from your side? Is that okay?
I can share it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's there. It's there. I think we see it right now. No.
No, it's.
Yes, I can see it now.
Okay. No, it shouldn't be this one. No.
No, it's the wrong one.
It's the wrong one.
No,
Okay, let me share it.
I had it open on my. No, it's not this one. Okay. Could you share it? Yeah, that's the one.
Okay, just give me a sign when I have to click.
Yeah, just click now. It's fine. Okay. Thank you. Sorry for that. We've tested it a few minutes ago and it was fine, but I don't know what went wrong now. So I work for the European Training Foundation. We are an EU agency. I see quite a few colleagues joining from ETF today in this discussion. I will talk about Centers of Vocational Excellence and a network that we have established in ETF, an international network of Centers of Vocational Excellence. Let me make a small introduction here. Why are we talking about Centers of Vocational Excellence and how these are linked with the topic that we're discussing today, lifelong learning, including TVET. So Centers of Excellence is an increasingly important policy area in the EU member states, but also beyond. And this is recognized in a number of publications that have come out the last couple of years. The last one, and perhaps the most important one from the EU side, is the recommendation on VET adopted by the European Council, where the centers of excellence are seen as an important driver for innovation, for development of the VET system, for lifelong learning. So there was also last year in September the Osnabrück Declaration, which is the follow-up to the Copenhagen process, where again centers of excellence were seen as an important area of policy making in education and training to support the further development of the systems, to support collaboration, networks, partnerships, and so on. All the previous speakers spoke about the importance of networks and etc. So we follow up on that. Being an EU agency, we work, of course, with countries outside the EU, with 29 countries outside the EU, in Central Asia, in Eastern Partnership, in the Western Balkans and Turkey, and South Partnership of the EU. So 29 countries in total. And because exactly we work on this external dimension of EU policies, we see that the issue of skills development is increasingly seen as part of these external policies of the EU. So we started working with that mandate, let's say, in hand. Our first approach was to see exactly what does it mean to have a center of excellence. Why is it so important? Why policymakers and policy shapers, they go for this option? And of course, there is also a friction in the term that we saw from the very beginning. It is often seen as an elitist sort of approach, which takes funds from the EU VET systems to create perhaps one or two or a few centers of excellence. So in our approach, we looked into this idea of transforming centers of excellence into engines for VET development. And this is what you see on this slide. So we started a mapping exercise where we asked different countries, how do they see centers of excellence? Because there is not one common perception of what a center of excellence is. And we developed this network, because one of the points that came out from our mapping exercise was this notion of isolation. That centers of excellence, they do well when it comes to provision of skills. They do well when it comes to collaboration with businesses in their region, in the close neighborhood, let's say. But when it comes to opening up to the international community, expand their partnerships, their networks, we saw an isolation there. And that's why we developed a network. I like this slide because it shows the complexity of a network. N being in the middle, N stands for ETF Network for Excellence. This is our network. We are trying to support peer learning activities through our network. We design our own tools, but then we use tools that others made as well to support the network. And we also encourage, we support partnerships between centers of excellence or clusters, groups of centers of excellence. So this is our network. You can see on the left side that we started from selecting a number of countries. We did a mapping exercise 2 years ago. Then we looked what are the perceptions. We developed a registry and we selected certain countries and centers of excellence to start. And let's go to the next slide. What you see here are the dimensions of our network. Obviously, when you're talking about centers of excellence, one could count maybe 30 different actions that a center of excellence could do. We decided to focus on only those 8 dimensions of excellence, at least to start with. Lifelong learning, as you can see, is the top one, because we see this sense of excellence as a good place, a good idea to work on lifelong learning in VET. And we don't mean only adult learning here. We're talking about the whole holistic approach to lifelong learning, from early ages to, of course, to elder people. Education and business collaboration, this is fundamental. Most traditional VET schools or VET centers, they do that anyway. But of course, nowadays, and previous speakers spoke about the notion of innovation there and what it means and how it comes out from this collaboration. So this is what dimension is all about. Pedagogy and professional development. This is an obvious one. We wanted to see from the centers of excellence, how do they train their teachers, for example? How do they cooperate with others in training teachers? How do they work on the curricula? How do they use others, the business side, to help with the design of curricula? Smart specialization is an important dimension in this discussion. Where they exist, the smart specialization strategies, they identify niche areas. And of course, the moment you do that, then you start thinking about, okay, but how do I support the provision of skills to support these niche areas? So centers of excellence come in. So it's skills for smart specialization, really, and innovation. Number 5, Industry 4.0 and digitalization. This is crucial. We're talking about centers of excellence that they have a long-standing experience in industry and digitalization, advanced manufacturing. Some of our centers of excellence, they are top in the world in that domain. So it's an important area that we want to focus on. Autonomy. That's another dimension, a very important one. The last speaker spoke about resilience of skills ecosystems. And of course, a center of excellence, in a way, it contributes to this logic of an ecosystem. But when we're talking about resilience, to use the word of the last speaker, then we're talking about autonomy. We're talking how do you to make sure that there is this resilience? And autonomy is an important element in this discussion. And institutional development, public-private partnerships when it comes to financing, all these, they go under this dimension. Going green, of course, supporting sustainable goals. This is crucial. It's one of the EU goals as well. So we wanted to see how centers of excellence contribute to that. And social inclusion is the last one, where we're looking at this social dimension of a center of excellence. What does it mean in this case? Some of the centers of excellence, they have contributed a lot, for example, to the training of migrants, or when it comes to gender issues. Why do they do that? And what's make them different from a traditional VET school? Let's say this is important. This is what we wanted to focus on in this dimension. Next slide, please. So we last February 2020, we kicked off with the network. After we've done our own research, we looked into the different perceptions, we discussed on different actions with the European Commission and the work they were doing there. And then we kicked off last February 2020, and we sent a letter to the ministers of 17 countries outside the EU, ministers responsible for VET. And we asked them if they were interested to join our network, and what sort of sense of excellence would they propose through their administration to join our network. Now, why did we address the ministers? I think this is an interesting question, because we wanted the ministers to be part of this process. We wanted the policymakers to be part of this process. In a way, in most countries, centers of excellence, they are created because of policymakers, because of a decision of policymakers, but then they are left on their own. So we wanted to make sure that in this transmission of excellence to the VET systems, the ministers were informed and involved. We have today, I checked the registry yesterday, and we have 110 members. So since last February, in 1 year time, 100 members from more than 20 countries, EU member states and outside the EU, they have joined our network, and every day more they're coming in. Yesterday we had a nice, interesting discussion with the region from Spain, that they said, you know, we're keen to join in. Now with Africa, there are discussions and so on. What are they, these members? They are VET schools, yeah, that they claim that they are excellence, sense of excellence, or they grow into this excellence. So the commitment is important here. They're universities. We have a few examples of universities that they have joined our network. clusters of VET providers, so platforms of VET providers, innovation centers, regional authorities, sometimes the whole region that enters into the network. And then, of course, with that sort of membership, all the centers of excellence in the region are joined up, technology colleges, and so on. Next slide, please. From the beginning, we said that we wanted to follow this approach of this developmental approach. So we don't see a center of excellence as one part of the system, but let's say one driver for change. That first of all, the center of excellence benefits, that it develops, it grows stronger, it grows bigger, but at the same time, it helps the VET system to grow and develop as well. So this is our developmental approach. On our website, on the ETF website, you can find there our publication, our paper on the developmental approach, where we see centers of excellence as drivers for VET development. And there we identify different elements. I will talk about those in the next few slides. Next slide, please. Now, the first thing that we came up, and perhaps it was a bit of a friction that comes with the term of excellence. It was this idea of who is, excellent. How do we know that the center is actually an excellent center? So we said, first of all, that we want the commitment. So it doesn't matter. We're not trying to measure this sort of excellence, but what matters is this developmental approach, that they continue grow, they continue improving, and so on. And for that, we needed a tool. So we designed this self-assessment tool, which has been very popular. This happened only less than a year ago. It's a product of ETF. So this is an online tool where we send to all our members. Members from outside also ask permission to use it as well, because they want to measure, and we can go to the next slide now. They can measure how well they are doing in the different dimensions that I mentioned earlier. And we measure that in 3 levels: the foundational, the developing, and the mature level. Now, what is the idea? Why do we want to do that? First of all, it's useful for the centers of excellence, for themselves to see how they are doing and how they grow, where are the gaps, where do they need to put more effort, and so on. But at the same time, it's important for us, for the network, for ETF, because in that way, for the European Commission perhaps, because like that, we can navigate our support to those centers of excellence based on their real needs. And then we have also the last line there. So apart from the 3 levels, we wanted to see also which centers of excellence could take one extra role in this, in the network, and be leaders in some of those dimensions. So we're actually looking into that as well. So our questionnaire adds a 4th level, if you want, which we're looking at these leaders, because they're important in different sub-initiatives. I will talk about those in a minute. The next slide, please. So talking about the developmental approach, we're talking about transmission of excellence. Yeah. So how excellence is transmitted from the center of excellence to other centers, but also to the VET system. And of course, unless there is a mechanism in place to facilitate this transmission, each center will go its own way. And this is what slide is all about: going your own way or going with the others, and then trying to bring others with you and improve together. That's the idea. Next slide, please. So for this transmission, we need, of course, collaborations, and collaborations can differ in terms of degree, what degree of collaboration exists. Is it through networking, association, integration? The duration of a collaboration. Are the centers of excellence collaborate on small projects or in longer partnerships where they build alliances and so on? The choice of collaboration, how is it done? The clustering, is it a voluntary basis? So we're looking into all those into the network exactly to facilitate the management of the collaboration is very, very important. And that's why we're talking with ASEM in this regard, and we're happy to build partners all around the world, because it helps us through this management of collaboration to improve the transmission of excellence. Next slide, please. what kinds of collaboration can exist. And I'm sure centers of excellence around the world, they do this type of collaboration. So they are sharing resources between them. They're sharing resources when it comes to training of teachers, of staff. They are training resources when it comes to their workshops, to their labs, other resources, other material, sometimes management through one sort of cluster. Collaborating to engage the business. This is very, very important. How do they do that? Work-based learning, for example, is a good way to make this business education collaboration. Collective provision of services, coordination. I will not go through all those. You can see them on the slides, but of course, if we want this transmission of excellence to work, if we want not just one center of excellence, but an excellent VET system, and we need to make this transition, then we're looking into this different types of collaboration. Next slide, please. In our work the last year, we kicked off different initiatives. So one initiative that was based on this business education collaboration and was focusing on work-based learning. Now, we have, let's say, went into a very interesting approach when we do a sub-initiative, a partnership. We have selected one leading institution, one center of excellence from our network, and then around that we have identified a number of centers of excellence, 15, 20, that they would work with that center of excellence on this topic of work-based learning. And there, of course, we offered that support. Then the outcome is to have a baseline study to see where do they stand when it comes to work-based learning, how do they do it, but also to have some coaching sessions for others, missions, and to help others grow into that domain. So this is one example of sub-initiatives. We had another one on autonomy and public-private partnerships. This year we're going to have more, perhaps one on entrepreneurship that will come later on in the year, and so on. Next slide, please. Skills for smart specialization. So I still have this in another slide, but I will dedicate these last points onto smart specialization. This is an important area of our network. As I said, smart specialization, it's ongoing work there with the European Commission, JSE, the Joint Research Center has the lead in this domain. But what we're looking at is the skills, how the skills provision is linked to smart specialization, and this is what we do in our network. And in ETF, there are different teams working on this topic. And the last slide, where we show our approach on how we look into this development of skills for smart specialization. So you can see a complex sort of intake that we need to have when we're talking about skills for smart specialization strategies. We are piloting this sort of approach into different regions in countries, and soon we are going to have our results of that piloting, and then of course we can use that wherever we have smart specialization strategies, and the dimension of skills provision needs to come in. I close with one word about our next big activity in ETF on the 11th and 12th of March. Note down the dates. We are going to have our launch event of the network. This is launch event part 2, because we already had last December our first part of the launch event, where we presented the logic, and of course we gave space to all the work that has been done. But this is the second stage now, where we give space to our members, and they present their work, they present how they benefit from this network, and why does it make sense for Centers of Excellence to join in. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Georgios, for this very enlightening talk about what the ETF is doing about Centers of Excellence, Center of Vocational Excellence. And you rightly pointed out that they, as multipliers, you would need actually effective mechanisms for transmission. And it's very, very interesting to see these self-assessment tools that you have developed. And also you've got a whole list of members for the under E&E, yeah? And it'll be interesting to see how the Asian actually centers could actually collaborate with E&E. And perhaps you could discuss this in the discussion session, yeah? Okay, we now move on to the fourth speaker. The fourth speaker is Ms. Shanti Jagannathan, who is the Principal Education Specialist, Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department, Asian Development Bank. She has worked on ADB education sector policies and strategies and provides technical advice and support to ADB's lending and non-lending education operations. She leads some of the knowledge initiatives and regional technical assistance programs in the education sector, and she has worked on policy research studies such as skills for greening economies and Asia's knowledge-based economies and innovation. She'll be talking to you today about lifelong learning in TVET and the partnership between Europe and Asia. Please welcome Ms. Shanti.
Thank you. Are you able to see my screen?
Not yet.
It was there, now it's gone again.
Okay. Can you see?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to join this interesting forum. It's a great pleasure and privilege to be amongst you. So I will try to address this topic from the context of what we do in ADB in the education sector. So in terms of my presentation, what I'll try to do is I will walk you through a snapshot of ADB's current and planned education operations, so to give you a sense of what we do in developing member countries, and and then I'll walk you through what ADB considers as possible lifelong learning approaches in the context of our work. Then I'd like to highlight, lifelong learning has so many different dimensions, so many different aspects to it. I will try to address maybe a couple of them, and then I will end with some thoughts on ASEM ADB partnership. So this is the current portfolio in education that we have in the Asia and Pacific region. Just to set the context, for Asia's, many of the things that are taken for granted in the more advanced world, like a full cycle of 12 years of schooling, are still a challenge in our part of the world, especially secondary education. And secondary education for girls is still a dream that is yet to be realized. And there are still several millions of out-of-school kids in secondary education. So it is against this backdrop that we undertake our projects and programs in our region. So we have a cumulative value of about over 6 billion investments in education, and this is spread across K-12 education, most particularly secondary education. But TVET, a large part of what we do, as you can see, is in TVET and tertiary education and more general education sector development. Now let me go on to sort of the pipeline. But before that, if I can also say that, lifelong, when we think about progress in lifelong learning, although the region has made impressive progress in access, it is more, the challenge now is more about learning and quality. So when we think about the pipeline of what we do, we really focused a lot more on improving the quality and learning achievements of students. And also the fact that a large proportion of students lack the basic foundational skills. So our portfolio is also about, onward portfolio is about, again, about 6 billion USD. And as you can see, the share of higher education in our pipeline has increased, and this is in response to the demand from our developing partner countries. As a result of extensive investments in primary and secondary education, there is a lot of push factor to tertiary education to improve and expand. On the other side, job markets are also increasingly demanding higher order skills. So there is a push and pull factor for higher education. And that's what we are responding to when we collaborate with our developing partner countries. The sort of the success in increasing enrollments in the lower grades is exerting the need for expansion. So ADB supports its member countries to partner with educational institutions to offer high quality courses, undertake research and research and development and innovation and partnership with industry, and to equip students with advanced digital skills, support ecosystems for entrepreneurship and innovation, and also collaborate with international faculty and institutions. Now, let me go on to this, the current world we are in right now. Just like, navigating out of the COVID period. Actually, education had a lot of challenges even before COVID, and you may have heard about the term the learning crisis that has been put out, especially in the context of the work of learning poverty that World Bank has been sharing. This stems from the fact that although a large number of students are enrolled in institutions, their learning levels continue to be a big challenge. There are also other aspects of quality that need to be improved, such as capacities of teachers, capacities of administrators, of supervisors, of those who do assessment systems, and also the deployment of new generation technologies. We used to talk about ICT, and now ICT has given way to EdTech. But when we think about public education systems, this is still a big challenge. So the continuation of rote learning, when in fact we should be moving into more personalized and adaptive learning, is still a challenge. And we're still working with traditional settings for providing education in the chalk and talk mode within classrooms, within four walls of an institution, whereas learning has now become anywhere, anytime. But the good news is that there is growing demand for education from our partner countries, especially after COVID. Although 2018 is a little bit of an unusual year for us because of some spillovers, but as you can see from 2021 onwards, the portfolio is doubling in size compared to the 2020 new commitments. So from 21 onwards, new annual commitments by ADB in the education and training sector is over to 2 billion, which is doubling of the current annual commitments as of 2020. So now let me move on to lifelong learning approaches as we think about them in our. But before that, why exactly? I mean, lifelong learning has been around for a long time. This concept has been around for decades. It's not a new concept, but at the same time, it gets redefined, it gets restated, and it gets new dimensions as we move. So if we think about the current setting, there are a few factors that call for this renewed focus on lifelong learning. One is that technology, especially the disruptive kind, is progressing at great speed, and it is really disrupting many aspects of how we live, work, function, and everything. And therefore, that makes skills and training redundant very fast. You have a need for a very complex set of skills, which the shelf life of which is very short. You need a combination of different skills, which need to come together for effective performance at the workplace. And those are also becoming, the shelf life is very, very, very short. And the way the digital natives, or what the millennials, the way they learn and the way they train is so very different from the previous generation. So education and training systems have to adapt, and also to provide the avenues for continued learning. And finally, the uncertainty of the future. We are really working with the premise of very unknown and uncertain job markets. And there's this joke that we've heard many times, is that in a 4-year engineering degree program, what you learn, the technologies that are taught in year 1 become obsolete by the time the student reaches year 4. So that's even considered slow speed. So technologies are evolving really fast and the pace of change is very fast. So therefore, what you learn cannot be a stock of knowledge. It has to be a flow and it has to be lifelong. So, and however, we have systems which are rigid to change. So ADB is working with the realities of slow pace of change in public sector systems, traditional styles which are very rooted in old style forms, and also lack of capacity to make the shift to these kinds of agile and responsive systems. But this is what we do. This is our bread and butter. Now let me come to how we look at lifelong learning approaches in the context of teaching and learning and the content and the relevance of it. The first is that whenever we do TVET projects or projects for training and learning, uh, countries are looking to see how can that talent and how can that skills development serve the interests of the country's economic growth and moving up the value chain and strengthen its competitiveness. So we're talking about knowledge-based economies and knowledge-based economic growth compared to previous cycles of growth, which were more on low labor cost advantages. So increasingly, our partner countries are wanting to drive knowledge-based economic growth, which calls for talent pools of this kind. The second bucket is around digital capabilities. As I mentioned, this whole digital transformation has become really huge, and it's affecting every part of our life in society. So to incorporate modern and digital capacities across the board, of course, not everybody will become a data scientist, but certain basic digital capacities have become like almost like another foundational skill. So how do we address that, and how do you make that happen for learners of all age and stage? Is the second bucket. The third is how can we make education and training responsive and agile to meet the emerging needs and disruptions in labor markets, and how can we make the systems more resilient and responsive to how we provide the talent pools needed for tomorrow's labor markets. That's the third bucket. So we're looking to make responsive education and training systems. And the last is that the whole foundational skills that include soft skills. And traditionally, TVET is all about technical skills and measuring technical competencies in a number of areas. But increasingly, we realize that it's not enough. It needs to be buttressed by a set of soft skills, problem-solving skills, creativity skills, and so that's how we look at a combination of lifelong learning approaches. Now let me go on to a couple of examples of how this plays out in real terms in the context of our work. The first is our work on the implications of Industry 4.0. This is a study that we recently completed and released. It's online, and those of you who are interested can access it. So this is the 4-country study that we took up to understand the implications of the fourth industrial revolution on the responsiveness of education and training. And to do that, we looked at 2 economic sectors per country and how the changes were taking shape from the employer side, and how were training and institutions responding to the needs for new courses and so on. So here again, it's a very small snapshot of a fairly comprehensive study. We found that companies are either already adopted 4IR approaches or will definitely do so in the coming period. We also found that contrary to fears that 4IR will lead to loss of jobs, actually productivity increases will actually contribute to increase in jobs. We also found that a very strong concept of this lifelong learning is that much more focus needs to be given for workplace-based training. So the green bars that you can see are all about the importance of additional training coming from workplace-based training when we think about additional skills and talent needed for the fourth industrial revolution. And finally, we also found that the use of I4 technologies in training tended to be limited. They're yet to. So education and training institutions are still lagging behind. They're still not fully adopted to all the augmented reality and virtual reality platforms and online platforms and so on. So we have a fairly extensive outlook to how we can inculcate a strong digital agenda going forward in the way we do. We support TVET as well as in higher education using digital tools to both help to improve the quality and relevance of training, but also how to use it for improved delivery, for management, for governance, and all of those things. So the second point, or the second example, is about an upcoming book that we are going to publish on a learning society. In the context of learning, lifelong learning, the role of a learning society becomes very important. So it's not just schools and institutions that deliver, make the contributions to education and training, but it's a huge basket of stakeholders who have a role and responsibility to contribute to lifelong learning. And this is what the book is expected it's forthcoming, expected in 2021. We have the manuscript assembled now. So it really addresses the notion of how a learning society, especially in the current context where disruptive technologies are playing out, in the current context of a post-COVID world, what are the roles and responsibilities of different stakeholders? There are some obvious players in this list, but there are also others like how do we look at infrastructure, infrastructure actors, and how so we have a pilot program called Build for Skills, which looks to inculcate the aspect of skills development in the context of infrastructure. We are also looking to see how we can at least a couple of speakers spoke about smart planning, smart education or learning cities. So we are also very, ADB supports smart cities in a big way. So we are also looking to connect the dots in how, city planners, metropolitan actors can also provide support to lifelong learning. Now, this last part is about ADB, some ideas and thoughts. How do I look at this whole notion of life cycle approach to education? The first is that it's very clear that this whole continuous skill upgrade and reskilling, upskilling is become really crucial. There are no degrees and qualifications for life. So what this means is that institutions and learning initiatives need to really look at much more ongoing and full life cycle approaches. And in the same way, the qualifications and credentials also need to adapt to this. Second is that digital skills are going to be so central to education and training. Gartner estimates that 80% of secondary schools in 2024 will have curriculum for specific digital skills. So this also means that when we offer lifelong learning opportunities, we need to think about the greater demand for digitally powered learning, but also digital skills, which are basic, intermediate, advanced. So we need different scales for different occupations and different work patterns. Third is that we need to really, when we think about lifelong learning, we need to build on good foundations. So a lot of, at least Asia and the Pacific, we suffer a lot on learning deficits. You have students going up all the way to the final stage of school and not having the competencies of even middle school. So how do we address the learning deficits? This is another area. How can we look at universities becoming change agents, and how can they also change the way they operate their business practices, especially in a post-COVID world? The whole blended learning reality is going to become far more important. How can we tap the role of parents and household spending to make lifelong learning a more real and a more rewarding experience in the lives of people and workers? And last, also we need to think about how we leverage and use different digital and other tools to strengthen the quality of our institutions, quality of education institutions. So in this context, sharing of best practices and successful practices from Europe to Asia would be really very valuable. This is my last slide. I mean, when I think about how we can strengthen lifelong learning approaches in the context of our portfolio, these are the points that come to mind. One is that to redress some of the balances. So we have a preponderant focus around early stage education. And then once that early stage education is done, the next cycles are all optional and may or may not take place. From that, we need to move to a much more balanced life cycle approach to education and training. Second is around focus around just the four walls of an institution, to look at learning which also occurs outside formal settings. So, and I talked about the large group of stakeholders. So learning can occur in so many different dimensions. How do we promote that kind of a holistic approach? Third is from COVID, from how to move from blended and face-to-face to more blended and digital learning, how to move from predominantly academic to more balanced experiential and workplace-based training. A lot more has to come from workplace-based training and learning. And how do we rebalance again a strong focus around technical skills to develop sort of a suite of skills which encompass technical skills but also soft skills, and the learning to learn skill is one of the most important aspects of lifelong learning. And the last part of the rebalance is around how do we move away from the traditional degrees that happen at the start of your career to a more lifelong approach where they also are backed up by further ongoing upskilling and reskilling credentials in the form of digital micro-credentials, digital badges, which are also make for lifelong stacking and continued learning. Finally, so in terms of key knowledge areas for sharing between Europe and Asia is that we are very, as a development bank, we are very concerned about how this all impacts or does not impact on disadvantaged and underprivileged people, especially girls. So, so we are very interested to learn about how we can strengthen our support and results, development results for these. Thank you very much.
Yes, and thank you very much, Shanti, for sharing with us the work of the ADB and for highlighting the challenges that we face now with COVID-19, with the rising technology and with the changing needs in terms of skills, and for telling us about the priorities of ADB. I'm sure there'll be questions about the key areas that you mentioned and the life cycle approaches and what ADB is planning to do for the future, but we'll leave that for the final discussion. We're running a bit late, and the last speaker, the fifth speaker that we have is Dr. Olga Oleynikova, who is Director of the Center for VET Studies and Coordinator of Erasmus Plus program in Russia. She has been involved in international education, both as practitioner and researcher since 1990, currently engaged in improving the quality and efficiency of Russian vocational education, as well as fostering international partnerships in this area. She has published extensively in different areas of research, and today she'll be talking about the future of lifelong learning and TVET. Please welcome Olga.
Okay, thank you. Good morning and good afternoon to those who are from just different countries of the world. I'd like to greet all our colleagues from ASEM countries, both in Europe and in Asia. And after so many excellent presentations, which covered practically all issues of which is on the agenda or in lifelong learning and nowadays, I would like to share some of my thoughts about it. First of all, the strategic objective concerning lifelong learning in TVET is really acute and on the agenda of every country nowadays. So that's why the importance of these issues is really, really very huge. We have to look, as many speakers told today, that we have to look at the context in which we live and will be developed in the nearest future. And this context is characterized by Industry 4.0, digitalization, gig economy, knowledge-based economy, sustainable and green development, enhanced migration and mobility, and many others. Lifelong learning is even more than adult education and vocational education. It is a mindset and a habit for people to acquire. As life increases around the world, people work now on average 40, 50 years. And the life of the companies, on the contrary, are becoming shorter and shorter. For example, in 1935, the average just period of the company was 90 years. Then in 2011, it was only 11 years. And this tendency is going on, so it is still falling. Lifelong learning definitely have to respond to just the trends and the context, as lifelong learning is a bedrock of Industry 4.0. According to the McKinsey Global Institute, between 400 million and 800 million people globally could be displaced by automation and need to find new jobs by the year 2030. Because of this, the need for employees to upskill and retrain themselves will likely be the biggest challenge of the coming decade. And of course, TVET schools have an obvious role in it. Nowadays, we consider TVET always in the context of lifelong learning. Today, we live in a very different economic and company environment, which is characterized by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and so on. That's why just we use the term black swans as of something which is not unexpected, which nobody could expect or forecast, as the situation which we face with the COVID. How we have to just achieve these goals, how we have to make lifelong learning and TVET more important for every person in our societies. We certainly have to keep in mind several things. The first things that we have to achieve it through the internationalization. And internationalization paradigm as the end and the means, just a very important tendency and trend nowadays. I will talk a bit about it a bit later. We also have to keep in mind that we need new competencies for the new world, and we have to change those competencies and always keep an interest in of what is going on in the industry and in just different surveys. Like, for example, the World Economic Forum identified the desired skills for 2022 include innovation, creativity, design, critical thinking, resilience, emotional intelligence, and problem solving. It is critical that development of lifelong learning competencies must start at an early age. And we have to understand that lifelong learning is not only the opportunity for getting educational qualification only in a formal education. It gives the opportunity of informal and non-formal education and learning, which is even more valuable for the just contemporary world. Well, just the multiple learning environments which lifelong learning provides, and TVET also, are to help people to build their personal brands and networks and to continue to enhance them. So that gives us some thoughts about how to foster lifelong learning skills in TVET, in technical and vocational education and training. First of all, we have to keep in mind that we now have to take charge of our own development. We have to work in just different environment, create and execute learning plans, work with mentors and seek feedback. We stay vital, measure progress, and make personal investments in our own developments. We have to identify the occupations of interest and that explore what gives meaning and purpose in life and place to our own strengths. And we have to make decisions ourselves. Then we have focus on the growth, on the career growth, on our professional growth, and lifelong learning will more and more will help to do it. We foster multiple fields of expertise, and that is also thanks to lifelong learning. So all efforts in the system of education and training are to form lifelong learners who are motivated to learn and develop because they want to do it. They have a farm, they have their own choice for that. To this end, the following principles should be promoted. Learning for its own sake brings its own advantages, and learning in whatever context boosts confidence and self-esteem, makes people less risk, more adaptable to change when it happens, helps to achieve a more satisfying personal life, challenges ideas and beliefs, and sometimes it can be a fun. What are the tools which have to be used and which some of them were mentioned today in our panelists' just presentation? First of all, it is the opportunities for progression and transfer due to coherent and consistent national qualification frameworks. We know that qualification frameworks are under development in more than 100 countries nowadays, and this tendency is growing and growing, and this is the instrument which really would like countries from different part of the world, from different part of our planet, just to compare qualifications, to recognize qualifications, to just work on the common qualifications and so on. And this area will develop further and further in future. Today it was mentioned micro-credentials. Yes, I also consider that micro-credentials is a very modern tool of lifelong learning, and it will be increased in the recent years. And of course, the last but not the least, which I already mentioned today, it's for the enhancement of internationalization and international discourse on the whole. Internationalization, especially in all fields of education, is an objective process of sustainable interaction of national systems of education and their mutual influence. It is usually based on common goals and principles. It usually addresses the needs of international community, and it definitely reflects the trends of the new century. When we speak about the aims of internationalization, we talk about, for example, TVET as the crucial thing to enhance the quality of TVET, but to enhance the quality by ensuring participation of students and teachers in the international exchange of knowledge and technologies, to ensure comparability of diplomas and qualifications, to enhance academic and labor mobility. And of course, we should not ignore the fact that foreign students also just help financially to any institutions who are involved in their mobility programs. To develop common strategies and principles for TVET development is crucial. And for ASEM just community, I think has to be on the agenda in the next years. To gear TVET policies to ensure that TVET curricula meet the needs of the economy and society, to enhance quality of graduates' training, to strengthen international cooperation and partnerships, and to ensure coordination of TVET school activities in different countries, and of course to encourage competition between the national systems. To this respect, we have to always remember that international cooperation and partnership will be growing and will be more important for the next decade and will be of another quality. That's why we have to be very careful and always linked with any kind of research or reports of the international organizations such as World Bank, OECD, UNESCO, UNIVOC, CEDEFOP, ETF, as they are developing the trends and they show us the context and the perspectives for the future development, both TVET and lifelong learning. We also should not ignore and be actively involved in the non-governmental associations and professional associations, different kind of association in this field. I could mention in TVET, it is International Vocational Education and Training Association, IVETA, and European Forum for Vocational Education and Training, IFET, which are very influential and have a great impact on the just developments in this area. The last but not the least, I would like to mention the European Union program Erasmus+, which is one of the most effective and successful programs of the European Union in the field of education. And this program have an opportunity to cooperate for countries from all over the world, from Asia, from Latin America, from Europe, from United States, all over the world. So now we are waiting for the call, which we are expecting to have in somewhere in the fall, in autumn, just the fall, where the partner countries, the countries which are not European Union countries, could apply for their applications in the field of technical and vocational education and training. So that is a unique opportunity to create partnerships, to build really international cooperation between our countries and our institutions, and to do something from the practical point of view, which will be useful for all of us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Olga, for your insights and your sharing your experiences about current challenges that we face in lifelong learning in TVET, and highlighting the importance of internationalization and cooperation. Yeah? So we've listened to 5 speakers, yeah, 5 very interesting talks. I think we don't have very much time for questions. We can take 1 or 2. I don't see any questions in the chat. Could anybody raise their hands if they wish to ask any of the speakers any questions? Yes. Yes, there's one question, yeah.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's a general question. First of all, let me thank the panel for making such an insightful and interesting presentations. The common trend, what I saw in all the presentations was the focus is on sustainable development, the focus is on employability, the focus on standardization like NSQF, and things like that. I'm wondering, when it comes to the question of learning to be and learning to live together, if that is the focus of lifelong learning and including TVET, I'm wondering how to place the learning or understanding of different different cultures, and how to use lifelong learning to develop cultural understanding, and how to include cultural knowledge as a part and parcel of a lifelong learning curriculum. Because until and unless I understand other mm, uh, other person's people's culture, it's difficult for me to be with them, to live together with them. I can live with them like living together separately, but not as involved as a group of a particular cultural community lives. So I would like to request the panel to reflect on that, how to include cultural understanding or cultural knowledge in lifelong learning, including understanding, learning of dances, learning of music, art. So please reflect on that.
Yes, would anybody like to respond from the panel? Yes, Olga.
Well, I could just give my ideas of that. To my mind, the best way to understand any cultural differences and to build intercultural competencies is to participate in the partnerships and international projects. When you collaborate in a project with different countries, it is going on just when you know each other, when you know from different countries and cultures a lot of new knowledge, and you are learning how to communicate with different people from different countries. Mobility to build the intercultural competencies. That's why European Union organized a lot of mobility in the field of education and spent a lot of money on just those exchanging of students on different levels of education. There are millions of them who participate, and the Erasmus Plus program gives this opportunity. Hope it will be the call which will be announced in the autumn will just identify those conditions under which we can participate in this competition for those grants. Another thing is the international projects, because cooperation, intercultural cooperation always gives a new product. This is innovative product. It is a contribution of different cultures and different approaches. That's why it is valuable. From this point of view, the best way is to create the joint programs. The joint programs which are developed but which consist of modules developed by different countries, different institutions, and altogether such kind of program is a real treasure. It is interdisciplinary, practically always, but it creates really completely new competencies for the students who attend these courses and for the teachers who try to provide all these services and all these new cultures just into their teaching activities.
Yes, I see Seamus and I think Georgia's putting their hands up. Would Seamus like to go first?
Okay, thank you very much. I think in addition to what Olga says, I mean, not everybody is going to be able to engage in international events and so on. One of the areas where we see possibilities in relation to this is in learning city context, in what we call learning neighborhoods, where people from different cultures, different backgrounds get an opportunity at a local level to interact with each other and to engage on cultural differences. And I think this is really, really important at a local neighbourhood level. The other thing to say, and this is at a more theoretical level, that in some of our research we look at different forms of capital that individuals and groups can accumulate. So we talk about identity capital, human capital, social capital, but cultural capital is also one of those really important capitals. And I think the questioner is absolutely right. I think this is one of the big challenges for us, and this is why we included it into the ASEM Lifelong Learning Hub agenda very much, is the idea of living together, learning from each other, and appreciating other cultures. Now, I know there are other people to speak, so I won't go on any longer than that. Thank you.
Mr. Georgios?
Yes, thank you. Very interesting question. Thanks for that. So the person who raised the question gave a few examples also of arts which could be included into this cultural understanding, as she called it. And I think that's indeed one way to do it. And traditionally, the learning centers, the learning providers, they have done that through different subjects linked to arts and so on. But I feel that in a globalized world, this is not enough. If we look at the example of the training for migrants, for example, there are elements there that they are looking into this cultural dimension. The language is crucial. So in any training for migrants or people from different ethnicities, the first thing that you usually do is to teach the language, because through that then you can understand the culture as well, and so on. Then of course through arts, again, this is very, very valid. But then you're looking into other elements that they create a bit more flexibility, and they encourage the learners to learn different cultures and to be engaged. So the logic of partnerships at the international level in reality is linked with that. If you create a partnership on a given topic that you are discussing, then through that work you're learning the different cultures and the different way of doing things, which is also part of the culture. So I think it's not just one thing. It's different processes that you need to put in place and mechanisms. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Georgios. I don't see any questions, and I'm afraid we've actually run out of time. Huh? So I would like to end the session by thanking the speakers very much for their insightful talks and sharing with us their experiences. And thank you also to the participants for staying with us to the end of this panel. I hand over the mic back to Nadia.
Thank you very much, Professor Azira, for moderating this panel discussion. And thank you, Seamus, Sarah, Georgios, Shanti, and Olga for wonderful and most interesting panel discussion. Thank you also to Seamus and Sarah for a compelling call to join the research networks. The PowerPoint presentations of the speakers will be shared, so if you want to take contact with any of them, you will have their email address and contact details after the event. Before sending you out to a well-deserved coffee, health, or tea break, please allow me to briefly explain how we are going to proceed for this next part, the brainstorming sessions. So we have this time again 3 breakout rooms, which will be moderated by 3 moderators. Today's brainstorming activity is called What's on Your Radar. I'm not going to explain what it entails exactly, because it will be explained after the break by all 3 moderators. Today you will be given about 25 minutes to brainstorm and exchange ideas. This part of the meeting will not be recorded, because we truly want you to speak freely and not be afraid to share weird ideas or innovative thinking as well. So the first group will be led by Reka Tosca, project manager in the education department of the Asia Europe Foundation. The second group discussion will be moderated by Michael Graham, a senior human capital development expert at the European Training Foundation. And finally, last but not least, the third group will be left in Dr. Anamika's hands, who is a faculty member at the National Institute of Educational Planning and Administration in India. So as I said, the three groups will be given about 25 minutes to exchange ideas, and then we will meet back in a plenary session to share results. Enjoy your break. We'll use this short interruption to sign you to your respective breakout rooms. See you in 10 minutes. The ASEM Education Secretariat has decided not to record the brainstorming sessions to allow participants to speak freely. We will, however, send the first draft of the Action Plan 2030 to all ASEM education partners and stakeholders, which means that all partners and stakeholders who did not have the opportunity to participate to our workshops will have the possibility to provide feedback and input in writing. Welcome back in plenary session. I hope you all had fruitful and discussion and meaningful exchanges. Due to some participants having to leave us a bit earlier, we ended up merging group 2 and 3, so Michael's and Annemiek's group. I hope that didn't disturb too much the flow of the discussion. Let's start with group 1, which was led by Rekka and assisted by Joni. Could I ask you to share with us the highlights of your group's discussion, please?
Yes, thank you, Emily. Can you please try sharing, Joni? Maybe it's working now. So we had a little bit difficulty at the beginning.
Yeah, I was saying that I'm still not able to share. Are you able to share again, Rekka? Sorry, it's just for some reason it's not loading for me.
Oh,
but the board has been updated anyway, so.
I can share it if you want. I have it here.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
We have it updated.
Big help. Thank you so much.
Yeah, apologies for the technical issues. It seems to be a theme today. And I promise you that we run all technical tests beforehand, but anyway, it seems to be working now. Could you maybe highlighting changes, Nadia, so we can see it better? Yes, perfect. And back to you, Rekka.
Thank you so much. So just a quick summary of our discussions. It was a very small group, but lively discussion. So basically, we identified some new initiatives and commented on some of the old ones as well. Regarding, let me start with the orange one, raising the profile at LLN and TVET and how to include more people from different backgrounds into LLM initiatives in the future. We heard an example from Germany that it's a big challenge to bring the vocational education pathways and the university education pathways together, and currently they are working on a system to make it more flexible. It's also a challenge because in maybe not necessarily in Germany, but in Asia and other countries, vocational education has maybe a lower esteem than the university one. Let me just share a call for participation from Jan from Germany. So any country, any ministry or institution is interested in their project of bringing these two pathways together and making it more flexible are welcome to join their brainstorming and work on this. Then lower below, still under this strategic goal, we have concluded that ASEM countries need to look at credentials in different ways and find new solutions to recognize informal and non-formal learning. And this is something that could be discussed more in the ASEM peer learning groups. Or we could also organize these exchanges around topics that are looking at the status quo, like what is going on in different countries, also taking into account the UNESCO Institute of Lifelong Learning repository, and make the exchanges around this topic a bit more lively. Then related to the second objective, how to engage business and industry into collaboration. There was a very lively discussion around Erasmus Plus and the opportunities in this regard. Erasmus just approved the new budget for the next 7 years, and we're very happy to see that it was increased and there are more opportunities for European institutions to work with Asians also in the field of LLL and TVET. However, we concluded that even more resources would be needed. It's also a big leverage point for the EU, who is also a member, a partner of the ASEM education process. So this is something that could be even further enhanced. And another, yes, and then another idea for action was here that maybe information dissemination seminars or partner finding seminars could be organized with ASEM stakeholders to help them to apply for such Erasmus projects which are targeting the advancement of LLM and TVET. So this is it in a nutshell from our group.
Thank you, Riga, for this very clear overview of your group's discussion. And thank you, Mr. Pawlowski, for sharing the initiative currently ongoing in Germany. I think it can certainly be interesting for us to have a closer look at that. Regarding credentials, we have a group, an expert group, we're looking at regional credit transfer mechanism and learning outcome systems. But up until now, they have mainly focused on more formal settings. So it could, of course, be discussed whether they could have a closer look at non-formal and informal settings as well. So we will definitely take a note of that. Let's now move on to what was supposed to be Group 3, which is now a mix of Group 2 and 3. I'm assuming that Annemieke was still moderating this session, or maybe Michael jumped in and co-moderated with you. Could you give us an overview of your group's discussion, please?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Yeah, interestingly, our suggestions are also overlap with Group 1. We also have suggestions on micro credentials, and we also have sorry, I cannot locate. Nadia, will you help me? Yeah, this
one on quality assurance and micro credentials.
Yes, this is actually it's very small. Yeah, yes, lifelong learning is a mindset. Universal approach on how to evolve new competencies and achieve. This suggestion is particularly related to the definition of lifelong learning. How do you look at it? It's for you. It's just that just skilling or reskilling, or it's more than that. So when there is a new situation, how to adapt to that. It's not just that you have enhanced your capabilities and you are able to adjust it. So it's the mindset. You have a prepared mind, doesn't matter which situation arises, and you have such competencies where you can immediately adjust to the situation. And another important area is if you do not have a degree, how to address that issue, and how to make yourself eligible for different roles. For example, in India, there are people, you give them a problem, they will fix it. But when you look at their degrees, they do not have that. But in the industry world, you need to ensure the level of quality, and for that, degrees are very important. And here, micro credentials can be very handy and help in a better manner. And how ASEM education process, and particularly this area of lifelong learning, can address that and evolve this area further. And there was another suggestion, bottom-up activities in ASEM. The participant has suggested that there are communities in different countries. For example, in this part of the world, Asia, there are small communities, learning communities, and they build on local knowledge, indigenous knowledge, and they contribute a lot. So we have to tap into those areas as well if we have to leave a mark in this area. ASEM education can spread its roots towards these community learning centers, and it's very well gels with the sustainable development goals, where this quality and affordable education for all is the focus. And we can sustain our societies in a much more better way if we include all those who are involved in life learning initiatives. And we also had this there was one more suggestion that which came from Germany, and the focus was that there is a disconnect between TVET and universities, and how these universities have to reorganize or rejuvenate themselves for a larger perspective. So by including lifelong learning into academic aspects of the universities, and then only we can attain the larger goal of lifelong learning. If we need to tweak the role of universities, and bring and bridge the gap between lifelong learning, which is generally considered as informal, non-formal aspect of learning. So to make it more organized and raise its status also, so universities have to look into that. And we have a hand raised here. Professor Otuoma would like to say something. Shall I, Emily, you tell me, shall I continue or wait?
Of course, you must take the floor, please.
To reiterate the point that you're making, but I think one of the critical problems we have is how we present lifelong learning. Lifelong learning, okay, so third level education is a small component of lifelong learning. You know, very often we present lifelong learning as a component of education. It's the opposite way around. Lifelong learning is the whole landscape. And in that landscape, there are different forms of learning. There's informal learning, non-formal learning, and so on. Kindergarten is part of that. What you learn at home is part of that. What you learn at work is part of that. What you learn at the university is part of that. So instead of asking the universities to include lifelong learning in their agendas, we need to make it clear to the universities that they are part of lifelong learning. They're not outside it, and lifelong learning is not a small component of what they do. They are a component of lifelong learning, and I think it's really important that we get people thinking in this direction, because this is why people are in their silos and they operate in their own little places, and they don't see the connections with other things. But if we're talking about lifelong learning, then all of these things have to start talking to each other. And that is a massive challenge. I agree with you, and I really like the conversation that you're presenting to us, because that is the big challenge. We talk a lot about it, but making it happen is the big challenge.
Thank you so much. Yeah. ASEM Secretariat would like to work on that and see how it can be worked, how university collaboration can yield such results. Let me continue with other suggestions. Here is this one: lifelong learning has many different objectives, not only for employment but also for cultural understanding. This is very important. If you look at the history of lifelong learning in 1970s, this was the objective which was propounded by Fowler's report, Education for Tomorrow, and there this whole idea of holistic and humanistic view was there. And when this cultural understanding comes into the picture, this whole viewpoint becomes very holistic. And so while ASEM education process is looking at lifelong learning, we have to have work. We need to use education to promote and lifelong learning to promote cultural understanding, because as during our discussion it was suggested that cultural understanding ensures smooth collaboration, cooperation. So in this way, ASEM education process can become a bit distinct also. And now here, partnership, vis-a-vis partnership, we had this suggestion that we need to know who are all the organizations which are involved in it. There are big organizations like UNESCO is the pioneer institution, and this collaboration with UNESCO. Along with UNESCO, there are other institutions. For example, ADB is also there, and we have other such institutions which are already working in this area. So we need to develop this network of partnerships with all those the institutions which are active not only in Europe but also in Asia. So maybe a list of such institutions which are functional both in Europe and Asia can be done, and see how we can collaborate with this organization. So first to identify these are partners, and then establish a partnership with them would be quite helpful. I think I have covered all the. Am I missing anything, Nadia?
No, I just maybe would like to add, as you can see, these are not really suggestions for new initiatives, but I think we have gathered during our discussion very valuable input on what aspects we should certainly work on in the ASEM education process. Right. I think it was maybe a first step to clear things out before we move into concrete projects and initiatives.
Right.
So thank you, Anamika, for giving this feedback from our group, and of course thank you to all the participants of our group for your inputs, and I think I can hand over now to Emily.
Thank you, Nadia, Anamika, and Seamus for highlighting that lifelong learning is indeed a mindset, and that learning can happen anywhere, not just in formal settings. Also like the expression that Shanti from the Asia Development Bank used of a learning society. I think that is a concept we could also maybe use in the ASEM context. Thank you also for putting intercultural learning in the focus and discussing the possibility of organizing bottom-up activities, because there haven't been much activities of this format in the ASEM education process so far, and maybe we could organize some in the future. For example, with UNESCO Learning Cities. I know that Seamus would be keen on that. Maybe we could also imagine a festival in the future. We discussed that last week. So on this note, I think it's now time to thank you, Rekha, and Anamika and Michael for offering to moderate, even if you didn't get a chance to. Thank you for giving us a clear overview of your discussion. Thank you also to Joni and Chiara, who had volunteered to lend us a hand with the technical side of things. We've now reached the end of our series of thematic workshops. I can tell you that the output of the discussion will be extremely valuable, both for us and the drafting committee, when we compile the first version of the action plan. Of course, the draft of the action plan 2030 will be shared by email with all ASEM education partners and stakeholders. So if you still have ideas that you would like to share, concrete suggestions, you will have the chance to do so in writing this time. This workshop was recorded again and will be shared in a few days together with the speaker's PowerPoint presentation. If you're interested, recording and the PowerPoint presentations of the previous workshops are already available on our website and YouTube channel. If you still have any questions, be it for us or any of the speakers, you're most welcome to email us at the email address on the screen, so info@asem-education.org. It is now time to conclude this fourth workshop. And while we would certainly have prepared to meet you in person and exchange over some delicious Belgian chocolates, we are truly grateful that so many distinguished speakers an expert accepted our invitation and that over 200 ASEM partners and stakeholders attended and contributed to a workshop. So thank you for your active participation and insightful feedback. Thank you also to our wonderful speakers and moderators for the excellent job, not only today, but during the past few weeks. You have to know that it was truly a team's effort, that a total of 33 people were involved. So it is a huge ASEM family. Thank you also to ASEF for handling social media communication. We definitely have a lot to learn from you. And before I send you off to a well-deserved lunch, a wonderful evening, I would now hand over to Leonie for a final family picture.
Thank you
I
so
would
much.
like to, sorry to intervene. I would like to thank Nadia and Emily especially. You have thanked everyone, but it's our responsibility to thank you both. Thank you very much for organizing this session as well as previous sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Annemieke.
You get a big applause and big thank you on our social media channels. So I encourage the other ASEM partners to like it and share it. Emily, could you just, if you don't share the screen, then we can do a group photo easier, exactly. And I invite everyone to smile. I hope we can, now it says there are only 14 participants left, so we should get everyone on board right now. I'll wait for a few more seconds so we have everyone. Yes, they're coming. Wonderful. Okay, 2 more seconds and then I count until 3 and you give me a big smile. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Nadia. Excellent work.
Thank you. And I think unless anyone else has a last word comment, I think we can officially close this series of thematic workshops. And I hope we'll keep in touch. Don't hesitate to be in touch with us and contact us by email if you have any questions or suggestions. Bye-bye. Have a nice lunch or good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.